Welcome back to the Important Nonsense Podcast. 32 teams in 32 days, getting you prepped for the 2023 fantasy football season, going around the league, breaking down every team for you. Today, we are here to go through the Chicago Bears. But you knew that already because you read the title before you clicked on this. As always, I'm Neil Smith, joined once again by at that FF nerd, aka at that cup holder nerd, Jason Draven. Jason, how you doing this fine morning?
I guess we're going to be talking about the Bears, so it could be, I guess, worse. I get to talk about fantasy football. That's what really matters, and so that's a joy that is forever filling my heart.
Forever filling your heart. All right. Um, yes, talking about the Bears aside, I am excited to be doing this show. Mike Burland, welcome back, buddy. Becoming a regular around here. I love it. How are you doing this morning?
Yeah, doing well. I mean, every team has fantasy relevant players, and we get to talk about that. So it's not the end of the world. And even the Bears, they have a few guys that are interesting. So I'm excited to get into it and talk about some football and the Chicago Bears.
Yes, yes, Bears. Those of you who've listened to this show years gone by know that this is the annual Important Nonsense Bitter Bears fan show. This year I have to carry that load myself, so don't worry. I'll have all that negativity that you've come to know and expect from this outlet around the Bears. But Mike, you are correct. Even the bad teams, and this will be a bad team, very bad, very, very bad, stinky, very stinky. Even they have some fantasy relevant players that you need to be prepared for. We will get into them here in just a moment. Actually, we're probably going to do the most fantasy relevant player first, but just a couple quick notes for those who may be tuning in for the first time live. All the rankings and ADPs you will hear are courtesy of Fantasy Pros. We are a Fantasy Pros affiliate and are happy to be so. Check out the Fantasy Pros ECR, where you can find my rankings and just the expert consensus rankings just in general. They're very helpful. The other thing is the depth charts that we are referencing come courtesy of Player Profiler. Shout out to Jack Kavanaugh. Jack, hope you're well. Appreciate your work as always. And with that, this is all based on 12 team PPR for redraft, aka God's format. We will obviously have notes, I'm sure, along the way for. I'm sure we'll talk about Dynasty 2QB. We'll call that stuff out. But generally speaking, these are a primer for redraft 12 team PPR. And without further ado, we'll go into quarterback. It's Justin Fields. Fields came off his breakout season last year where he really showed what he can do, even on a bad team. He carried that hideously nasty, disgusting disaster of a team that was the Bears last year. And he at least was fun to watch. He really showed you what he could do with his legs, especially considering he had the worst O line in pro football, and they were an utter disaster. He was running for his life all year. It's a miracle he didn't get hurt worse than he inevitably did. And also on top of that, he had no wide receivers to throw to. His best pass catcher for a lot of the year was the tight end who we'll talk about a little bit later. They had absolutely nothing for him to work with. Last year's Bears team was their strategy was going around and collecting everybody else's wide receiver 5 in the league, like Thanos collects infinity rings. It was a terrible strategy. And even with that, he was fantasy viable. He was actually a league winner down the stretch for certain people. Maybe not a league winner. He was a playoff clincher. I'll say it. I'll clarify it that way, because he was widely available on waivers for a lot of the year until he started going off. And as we've seen before, he is one of the Konami code quarterbacks. He can do it with his legs. He has that juicy rushing floor, and he has a lot of rushing upside because he is fast. As such, unfortunately, folks, for 2023, the days at the discount window are done because he is coming in ranked as the QB6, translating to about 61 overall. His ADP is 45. And as such, it guarantees that I will not roster Justin Fields in just about any league that I am. that I am going to, and also that I will also be recommending that everyone else not be rostering Justin Fields, irrespective of the idea that he is good with his legs and will put up value. That's just too high for me to get interested in really any quarterback at that level, but especially when you're talking about that's premium quarterback level where I'm more interested in like a Jalen Hurts at that price. So for me, I'm going to be out on Fields given where he's likely going to be going. 45, you're talking about the 4th round. That's too rich for me for Fields, really for most quarterbacks at all in redraft. So I will be passing on Justin Fields. You get it? You get it? Because Justin Fields will be passing the ball. I'm going to be passing on Justin Fields. You get it? You get it?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's still a bad joke. It's fine.
It is. It is. It really is. And then without just before we get into it, Justin Fields' new backup is PJ Walker. Great real football move, means nothing for fantasy. I actually love it for real football. Don't care for fantasy at all. He has no value. But PJ Walker,
week 17, maybe.
Right, week 17. PJ Walker just keeps getting jobs. It's fascinating. Who would like to start with Justin Fields? I've said my piece on this, and I'm actually already ready to move on. So who would like to go next? Mike Burland, you're up.
I'll take it.
Go for it, Mike.
Yeah, Justin Fields, obviously, if you a good reason to excuse me 1 second. Good reason to join our Discord and watch the waiver wire show is that we were kind of in on Justin Fields right before he was breaking out. You know, he had his huge games of like 150 yards rushing or something. So just a little plug there. But you know, obviously Justin Fields is fantasy gold, but you're gonna have to pay up for him, like you said. And I'm okay if you truly want to pay up for a quarterback. You know, these are the guys that I'm going to target over. You know, he's going around guys like a Justin Herbert or maybe a Trevor Lawrence or even Joe Burrow's, I think, going ahead of him.
Joe Burrow's going significantly ahead of this year.
Yeah.
We'll talk. You know, we're actually going to talk about that tomorrow.
Yeah.
So we'll get into that. That's a whole other thing.
But you know, so if you truly want to pay up for a quarterback, if you truly believe that last year, if you didn't have a top tier quarterback, the cliff off those top 3-4 guys was huge, and if you didn't have one of them, you probably didn't do so well. And if you believe that's kind of going to be what the future of fantasy football is, then go for it. Take Justin Fields here. Take a guy that can, you know, give you a strong rushing floor, because he's going to maybe not put up the pace that he was on last year, but he's still going to be 800 yards, you know, and we expect him to improve as a passer. He actually, we're going to get into it, has a competent receiving core, unlike last year where he was thrown to like Byron Pringle and Demarcus Robinson. So, you know, we expect him to take that leap as a passer, hopefully. And you combine that with, again, his 800-yard, probably 800-yard rushing floor. The guy can put up 150 yards rushing in a game. You know, I'm fine if you want to pay up for him there. It's not my strategy, but I'm not going to argue. Again, your normal home leagues.
I would absolutely argue about it. I'd say it's people overreacting to a 1-year sample size, and I would argue that it's objectively wrong.
Definitely, but I mean, Lamar Jackson was a 1-year sample size. I know that was MVP level, but you know,
I can cherry pick any example you want. This is the same, dude. I'm old. I've been doing this so long that I could cherry pick you the example of Peyton Manning, 1st-round quarterback, the year he rewrote the record book, and then everybody ever since then was Thad when they overdraft quarterback, trying to replicate lightning in a bottle. Like, I could cherry pick you any example you want, man. Like, I got a wall of evidence that tells me that the right strategy is to wait on quarterback and then double tap it around the mid rounds in the 10th and 11th round.
Yeah.
Last year, obviously notwithstanding, historically over a 10-year period, hell, a 15-year period since I've been doing this. Like I said, I'm old. I've been doing this since 2005. Yeah, I know a lot of people just turned to dust hearing that in the background. Going back to then, like, those were the days of getting Phillip Rivers at a value. And Jason, remember those days? The glory days where I could get Phillip Rivers down the line. Like, yeah, those were the salad days, man. You don't know what you got till it's gone. I just cannot justify, even with the rushing floor, recommending to people. I cannot stress enough how bad of an idea I think it is to hitch your wagon and roast in a 4th round pick on really any quarterback. This is why I always try to look for values like later on. Like,
I generally agree. But I mean, again, if you're going to do it with the guys that can give you the rushing floor, because historically, Justin Herbert's the perfect example of the guys that don't really have a rushing floor. And look what happened last year after his almost 40 touchdown year, where he had a bad touchdown year and only threw 25 or 27. And then you
for a lot of that, but
you lost. You lost.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah, but it's all about return on investment. Okay, I'll put it to you this way. If I was going to do what you're talking about doing, I'm not doing it with Fields. I'll do it literally with
say it.
Jalen Hurts. I'll do it literally with like a Jalen Hurts. That's
I thought you were going to go with a late round guy who
he's a couple
No. I'm talking
earlier,
about
right?
Nah. I'd have to double check
was,
what his actual ADP is at the moment. I don't have it immediately in front of my face because I don't have my Eagles notes immediately up. But I would rather do it with a guy I've seen, do it before. If I'm going to, okay, how about this then? If I'll push the boat out and be willing to do it in the 4th round, screw it. I'll just get Patrick Mahomes in the 3rd. Like, I'd rather, if I'm going to do what you're talking about doing, I would rather, which I do not recommend. I want to be very clear. I would do it with somebody I've seen do it before, and on a good team that I have confidence in, not a guy who had one decent half a year on a team that is going to win maybe 4 games if they're lucky, with a bad defense still because they can't fix it. It scares me. Everything about Fields is terrifying to me. Although I do acknowledge what you're talking about, Mike. There is a certain level of mystique and upside and rushing floor, and if it breaks his way, would it shock me if Justin Fields ran for 1,000 yards? No. Realistically, no. Like I'd be. That sounds very plausible. So I do understand the idea. We're going to talk about this. I can tell we're going to talk about this a lot this year. About the idea of where quarterback should be drafted and how I'm starting to notice people overreacting to last year's sample size. And I know you're saying you don't have an issue with it. Not to belabor the point, but I decidedly do have an issue with it.
Well, also, we got to know who you're drafting with. And we talked about this before, but when we have our general home leagues of more casual fantasy football players, they see Mahomes, they see Mahomes and Burrow, they see the name and they overdraft these guys. I have leagues where people are taking 2 quarterbacks in the first 6 rounds, and that just totally messes up the whole quarterback market. And you do have to reach. I personally have to reach a little bit. So
I don't. I love those leagues because I have all the best running backs, and then halfway through the year, I start making trades, and then I have a super team by week 10, and storm into the playoffs with it. So
no, I generally agree with you to wait on quarterback, but the rushing guys are the guys. The guys I could see finishing, QB 3 and higher are the guys I'm gonna overreach for if I am gonna reach.
All right, fair enough. Jason, I appreciate you waiting patiently while he and I kind of hash this out for the listening audience. What do you think about Justin Fields, real quick?
I mean, if you are worried, I like the fact that he does have that rushing floor, but I hate drafting quarterback anything before the 10th round. I mean, I go to the waiver wire. That's part of the reason we have that show is because of this. I mean, there's so many good quarterbacks every year. Jared Goff was massive last year. I mean, and he was.
No, when you're right, you're right. I argue with you about that a lot, but you ended up winning that particular argument.
Daniel Jones, again, another one who is always readily available, or Trevor Lawrence. Those are all guys last year who finished in the top 12 at the quarterback position, and they were available more often than not on the waiver wire. So it's just those things that while Fields does have that rushing floor, and if you are worried, sure, go with somebody like Fields. If you're reaching, I'd rather go with Allen or Hurts because you can. I mean, if you're reaching, I'd rather get the guy that I know is going to be the one scoring the touchdowns. And I don't see Fields getting as many rushing touchdowns specifically as either of those 2 players. But it's just one of those things that you take that into account and hope that, getting, well, we'll talk about later, but DJ Moore and hoping for the kind of season that Allen had when Diggs showed up. That's a big reach, but that is kind of what people are expecting, and I think that's why he's going so high.
Could do. I will, like I said, I will not roster any Justin Fields at this ADP. More than likely, I will have 0 shares, and I'm fine with it. I'm more than okay with it to let that go at that point and continue to load up on quality wide receivers and running backs and let everybody else beat each other to death with sticks over the high-priced quarterback stuff. The running back room. Woof. They have completely rebuilt this room. David Montgomery is no longer with the Bears, which is fine. They hated him anyway. Goodbye, David. I very much do enjoy watching him play football. I will be looking forward to seeing what he does in his new home in Detroit. Big part of the reason why they were willing to let him go, Khalil Herbert had his breakout year last year prior to the injury and was very effective for the Bears on a run-first team. He demonstrated good burst, good ability to catch the ball, good ability to run between the tackles. No ability to pass protect. None at all. And frankly, probably cost himself some real job security in the process. Pretty decent player from what we've seen so far, limited sample. There is some excitement around Herbert, but for reasons we'll get into here momentarily, a lot of cold water has been thrown on this in the form of a free agent signing. Donta Foreman. Donta Foreman is like...
He keeps finding a way, man. I don't know. It's a freak thing. I mean, it's reminding me of when Waller showed up on the Raiders and we're like, oh, he's been around. Nobody's cared about it. And then all of a sudden he has massive year. And Foreman does that. It's so random.
Yeah. I think Neil may have frozen, but yeah, he's the last couple of years he's a talented runner, and it's proven that he can come in and he rushed for almost 1,000 yards last year, and he wasn't the starter. McCaffrey was there the first 6 games or something. So, but yeah, Neil, I think you're back.
I am. Okay. My apologies to the listening audience there. Minor technical difficulty. I will send your hate mail directly to Comcast. I'm sure they'll be happy to read it. But yes, I apologize. I missed some of the Donta Foreman conversation, but I bet I can fill myself in pretty quickly. Donta Foreman is kind of a fly in the ointment, right? Where it's like, what do you do with this? It'd be one thing if we thought he was going to get the whole job to himself. I'd actually be pretty excited about Donta Foreman. We've seen what happens when he can have that whole job. He's a pretty solid actual rusher, not much of a pass catcher. But in this format, it is hard to kind of get excited. He kind of just siphons off a lot of value from some of the other guys. And the other one is Rashawn Johnson, who was an actual Bears draft pick by this regime in this year's draft as a rookie. So we'll go through some ADPs here real quick, and then we'll kind of skin it from there. Khalil Herbert coming in as the RB 35, 93 overall is what that translates to roughly. ADP 101. So he is the one that both the experts and the public is on. That's roughly a 9th, 10th round pick, something like that for Herbert, which would be cheap for a starting running back in theory. But because of what we just said, there's 2 other guys and Travis Homer waiting in the wings. Nobody knows what this is. They've hired a lot of competition for this, and the competition is a lot less expensive. Donta Foreman is basically being treated effectively as the handcuff, which I actually think is wrong based on what I've been reading and what I've been seeing coming out of early camp reports. We'll get into that in a moment, but Donta Foreman coming in as the RB 49 translates to 128 overall, ADP 129. Sounds about right for a handcuff, right? If you were going to go that direction with Herbert, you could very easily get Foreman. I wouldn't necessarily say that's the worst idea I've ever heard in my life. The fly in the ointment there then becomes Rashawn Johnson. Rashawn Johnson, RB 59, translates to about 171, so you get him at the end of the draft. ADP 150. This is a mess, gentlemen. This is a hot mess in the background here. I'll give you my thought. Every camp report, everything that comes out of Bears media and the tape and the actual, the people bring their phone and record the early camp stuff. It's Rashawn Johnson. They love Rashawn Johnson. There's a reason they drafted him. It seems like they want him to get involved early and often, but they also signed Donta Foreman off the street and project to give him some work. And then Khalil Herbert was really good last year. This could devolve into a real 3-headed monster from where I'm sitting. And if that happens, then honestly, none of it's very attractive from my side. It's kind of baked into the ADPs at a certain level, which is good because none of these guys is being drafted super high. So it's kind of hard to end up too far upside down on it, but it kind of scares me off all of them. And it almost makes me most interested in Rashawn Johnson just because that's the cheapest. And if it doesn't pan out, you could just cut him and move on. But at the same time, we talked about the running back cliff, right? Where in previous shows, where the running back cliff this year is insane. Where it's like by the 7th, 8th round, I mean, it's done. So technically any of these guys could be of value, but because there's 3 of them and they all have their warts, Herbert can't pass protect, Foreman can't catch, and Rashawn Johnson, we don't know. We've never actually seen it. There's a lot of defined warts to all of this. I think if I had to plant my flag into one of them, it might actually be Rashawn Johnson just because it would be the cheapest, and that's the one they think the most about. What about you, Mike? What do you think? What does any of this float your boat even? What do you think about this whole mess?
Actually, weirdly enough, like I'm okay with all 3 at where they're being drafted because you're not investing. I thought there was going to be Khalil Herbert. People were going to overdraft him. And
6th round.
First one. Yeah, I was going to be.
We talked about James Cook. There's a world where James Cook's going in the 6th round as an ADP.
Yeah,
doesn't have nearly didn't have nearly the production Herbert has. So I do find that interesting.
But yeah, I was ready to be like completely out on Herbert. Just like we don't want to assume just because he had a couple good games when Montgomery wasn't there, or even when Montgomery was there, that's going to translate into a whole season. We've never seen it even in college with him. So I'm fine with all 3. I like all 3. I think I would plant my flag in Rashawn Johnson as well, just because, there were people talking about, like, is he the 3rd best running back in this draft? Obviously, he played behind Bijan Robinson, and we know what kind of player Bijan Robinson is. So he just didn't get the opportunity. But when he did, he shined. If you watch his film, like, the guy never goes down with first contact. He can pass protect, which is rare for rookie running backs. He's a big guy. He can catch the ball. I think
I want to underline that pass protection point for you, Mike, like 3 times on the page. You got to, because guess what? None of these other guys can do. Foreman never really gets asked to pass pro because he's a true running back and isn't on the field to have the opportunity. And Herbert nearly got a couple people killed.
Yeah.
Which is part of why, like, it's very important that you be able to pass protect. And it's rare that you have a rookie that can pass pro at the level that Rashawn Johnson can. You also mentioned about the pass catching. I didn't do it. Go circle back to that point about the pass catching.
Oh, for Rashawn Johnson?
Yeah, I didn't talk about it when I was breaking it down.
I mean, he's shown that he can. Again, he didn't get a lot of opportunities. Like he had less than 100 carries last year in college. Again, he was playing behind Bijan his whole basically Texas career. So he can catch the ball. I don't think he's like this amazing talented pass catcher, but he's shown that he can. And when you're out there in pass protection, you're going to get those opportunities because if you don't have to stay in and pass protect, you're going to leak out and catch the ball. So I like all 3. D'Onta Foreman, I think coaches really like those type of players that just no nonsense. They hit the hole and they go. They're not trying to look for that explosive play, which we're kind of seeing with maybe like a DeAndre Swift or a Kenneth Walker, where teams are maybe souring a little bit on that. But I like all 3. I am worried that it turns into a 3-headed monster. If I had to kind of plant my flag in someone, like you said, I think I'm going Rashawn Johnson just for the fact there's a little bit of unknown, which is always exciting. He could be one of the better running backs in this draft because we didn't see a lot of them in college, and he can do the dirty work, which teams love, and that's going to get him on the field.
Jason, what do you think?
I am actually going to not be with. I like Johnson. I do think he has a lot of opportunity, but I do think that it's one of those things that got to get used to the pace of play in the NFL. So I'm actually going with Foreman as the guy that I would reach for.
I can't say I blame you on this because this is the khaki pants, put cream in your coffee, type of pick here. So I can't. We've seen Foreman have success, right? I'm sure that's where you're headed.
And the big thing for him is I think that he's just going dominating touchdowns. I mean, that's an area where I see, hey, you know what? We're 5 yards in, find the hole and hit it. This is the guy to do that. I mean, that's the whole reason I have him with the most carries, and I mean, they're all relatively close in their carry counts, but I have him far and above everybody else in the touchdowns that he's going to get. And even with the targets, he's right in the middle. And so it's just one of those things that having that just baseline use of those three, I'm probably going to end up with Foreman more often than either Herbert or Johnson.
Yeah, and I want to be clear because it almost sounds like we hate Khalil Herbert. I don't hate Khalil Herbert. I actually think it's a decent value. It's just that even at the 10th round, honest to God, by then I'll probably already have my running back room largely situated, given how I typically draft. And with the fact they've added 2 other people, and he couldn't pass protect last year, and that's going to be the priority for this year for the Bears. They've already come out and stated that they need to figure out how to keep Fields from getting killed and protect their franchise. You can't risk having a Herbert out there doing that. And if you were going to tell me that Herbert is just going to be able to a rusher, well, Donta Foreman's a better rusher than that. That's what's scary about the whole Herbert thing. And if the best, go ahead, Mike.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, if the best pass pro guy of the 3 is Rashawn Johnson, then he'll be out there on 3rd down. And they want him to be out there on 3rd down. They freaking drafted him. And Travis Homer is Travis Homer. He sucks.
Yeah.
That's a confusing signing. I don't know why they signed Travis Homer. It made no sense to me when they did it, and I'm not happy about it. And I'm just going to move on from it. Well,
another body. That's why they have him.
It's true.
With 2 things I'll say to kind of finish up. One, players can improve, right? We're talking about Khalil Herbert and pass protection.
No.
Yeah, like
I reject that.
From year to year. So like it's not out of this world that he just gets better at pass protecting and he becomes viable. And then the second thing is, they signed D'Onta Foreman, but then the draft hadn't happened at that point. So is there a world where they wouldn't have signed D'Onta Foreman if they knew they were going to get Rashawn Johnson? Maybe. And so I always think about that as well.
I think it's more likely they wouldn't have signed Travis Homer if they knew they were going to get Rashawn Johnson, man. I think that's probably more accurate, but okay.
Yeah. So, just 2 things that I wanted to mention. But it is interesting to take a shot on one of these guys because if one of them is the main guy, I think there's a lot of value there.
I wouldn't blame you if you didn't want to go with the rookie and you did want to go with D'Onta Foreman, like Jason's saying, because I've seen D'Onta Foreman have success the last several years in a row on bad teams, which is what this was going to be, doing the garbage duty. He is like the garbage man. Like whether it's Carolina, Tennessee, Houston, like he's the garbage man. They send him in to do the dirty work, and he's pretty good at it. And hey, just like the real, by the way, they don't tell you this when you're a kid, but just like the real garbage man in real life, you get paid pretty well. Like just they don't tell you that when you're a little kid, but the garbage man gets paid a significant amount of money to do that job. So there's a reason, and the garbage man is always employed. Let's put it to you that way. Nobody wants to do that job, but if you're willing to do that job, there's some job security, as they say. Let's do wide receiver here real quick. The Bears are holding like 9 wide receivers, and that's insane because none of them matter. Well, a small smattering of them might matter. But the bulk of it is just horrible. I'm not even going to go through the whole room because it's not worth knowing. Just don't trouble yourself with it. Focus on this. We mentioned yesterday in the listeners' world that DJ Moore was no longer a Panther. Well, that's because he's brought in by the Chicago Bears. The Bears did it. They had to get a replacement for, Allen Robinson, who, long gone at this point. The Bears haven't had a true wide receiver 1 in a long time. Believe it or not, DJ Moore is only 26. Blew my mind when I had to look that up. I thought it feels like he's been in the league for 100 years, and I feel even older now than I did when before I read that. But yeah, he's only 26 years old. He's still relatively young in wide receiver years. It made a certain amount of sense. It was actually this new front office for the Bears. I totally get why they wanted to go and get DJ Moore. He's not my favorite, alpha wide receiver 1 type of guy, but they desperately needed somebody to really do it because as we learned last year, Darnell Mooney, who is still there, is not a wide receiver 1. Can succeed, is a decent enough player, but he cannot be the wide receiver 1 for your team. He's just not built to do that job. The Bears also brought in Chase Claypool in a stupid trade last year. He's still with the team. And believe me, I don't hate Chase Claypool. I did hate the trade that brought him to Chicago, but that's not Chase Claypool's fault. He is still there. He will be doing Chase Claypool things, aka running down the field with his arm up. Which, that's fine. They needed a field stretcher. And as far as that goes, he's not too bad. They also still have Equinemius St. Brown, Velus Jones. None of that matters. None of it matters. The ones that matter, DJ Moore, he'll be the true alpha, such as the Bears can have a true alpha. It's all going to come down. His future is tied inexorably to, can Justin Fields improve as a passer? If you're one of these people that thinks he's going to try and go the Jalen Hurts route and can really improve, you're probably more interested in DJ Moore. If you're me, you're probably not. As such, the public, the ranking in the public, it goes like this. His overall ECR ranking, wide receiver 23, translates to about 44 overall. ADP is 55. So you definitely have some people like me in the public who are like, seeing DJ Moore struggle. He was wide receiver 20 last year. We brought this up on a previous show. But can the Bears actually throw the ball effectively becomes an issue. We saw them really struggle at that last year. It got better towards the end of the year, but that's why I think there's some cold water on his ADP. I think it has a lot less to do with DJ Moore and a lot more to do with the Bears. If you want to hang your hat on something, they're going to have to throw it a ton because they're still going to be bad. And I don't think they're going to be able to. Like grind the ball out, the game out the way they want to. Does anybody, Jason? What's your take on DJ Moore? Where are you at with this whole conversation?
Man, I continue to like DJ Moore. So I mean, if you're looking at a wide receiver too, I think DJ Moore is definitely the guy that can fill that void. And I mean, I think the targets are definitely going to be there. And because of how long he's been in the league, I feel like the fact that he's going to be a similar kind of a safety blanket because he's going to come back to the quarterback when he sees he's in trouble. He's going to read because he's had to. Every time he's in Carolina, they haven't had somebody that's been just an outstanding quarterback. So for DJ Moore, he's going to be the one who is constantly looking not just for the route that he's running, but also to see what the quarterback is doing and adjust to it. So that gives him a high value. And you said like last year, he was wide receiver 20 and that was on a bad team. And I don't see any chance of that really changing for him because he's just that consistent guy. He's going to see the targets and he's effective with every target that he gets.
I'm with you on that. Mike, what do you think? DJ Moore, yay or nay?
Yeah. I mean, it's so tough, right? We got ADP 55, so we're looking 5th round. I'm okay with that. I'm okay with the 5th round. Yeah, he was wide receiver 24. But I like to, a note is like you were wide receiver 24 and you played every game. That's different than being like Cooper Kupp, wide receiver 23, and you missed 6-7 games. Like, you're almost guaranteed if you're number one receiver and you play 17 games to be a top 24 receiver. But the points he was giving you were not doing anything. They weren't turning heads or anything. So I think the biggest thing is he going to have and Justin Fields, Josh Allen comparisons, DJ Moore, Stephon Diggs, are they going to have these career turns in the 4th year in DJ Moore's career, fifth year in his career where he becomes like that Stephon Diggs? I don't see it. I think the biggest difference, I hear that a lot, and I think the biggest difference there is Stephon Diggs was kind of like the 2 or 1B in Minnesota with Adam Thielen there, and DJ Moore's been the number 1 guy in Carolina the last 3 years, so that's the biggest difference. But if we are buying into Justin Fields taking that next step as a passer and DJ Moore is his guy, then I can see him returning a little bit of value. I just don't see a lot of upside with the 5th round pick with him, but he could be, like Jason said, just that top 24 number 2 receiver that kind of gives you that consistency. And there's value in that for sure.
Which is why he comes in as a 5th round pick. I will tell you, the 5th round pick thing for me really is you are drafting him at what I believe to be his ceiling.
Yeah.
So that is something to think about as you're evaluating players. I will say for that reason, I don't tend to wind up with him in mock drafts because I feel like that's his absolute ceiling is the 5th round. Anything higher than that, you're not going to return anything on investment, and it's going to be really hard for him to even return a 5th round pick. So I tend to go another direction than DJ Moore. Now, if he falls a little bit further than that, then I'm back in, but I'd prefer to get a little bit more of a discount than where he's currently going. And for that reason, I actually tend to more look at Darnell Mooney because he's kind of, if you squint, you can kind of still see the shine on it, but he's very much coming off the scratch and dent pile at this point because he had a brutal season last year, being asked to do a job that he very much is not equipped to do. Now, that being said, they're not asking him to do that job anymore, and he's already got a connection with Fields. So I'm a little more interested in Darnell Mooney because wide receiver 51 translates to 136 overall, ADP 144. That's more like it. I can get Darnell Mooney at the end of the draft for way, way less. So, and there is still some upside potentially baked in. There's more upside baked into that idea. And I'd rather go with if I'm looking at 5th round wide receivers, they're just other guys that are typically still available that I like more when we get into that arena more often than not. So I tend to not want to go the DJ Moore route. And if I'm going to go with a Bears wide receiver, I'm more likely to wind up with Darnell Mooney way later in the draft. And then real quick, because we've got to move on, Chase Claypool, not draftable. However, he will be a regular on the waiver wire show with Jason Draven on Mondays, I have a feeling, because he has no current ADP, but he's right outside the range of draftable. One injury in Chase Claypool, and I don't mean one injury to the Bears. I mean like one injury in the league. And Chase Claypool probably does get rostered because he's just on the fringes of fantasy viable. It's not something that's worth drafting, but it is something that I would recommend everyone knows exist. And then after that, there's no Bears wide receivers that I would care about. Let's talk about the real wide receiver that I think actually matters for the Bears. This is the other reason why
I'm here.
Let's talk about this because Cole Kmet, still here, still selling fake doors. Don't buy into the fact that the Bears brought in Robert Tonyan. Means nothing. Robert Tonyan is not there to take Cole Kmet's job. Robert Tonyan is there to be a glorified body, and he's going to do the traditional tight end work so that Cole Kmet can do Cole Kmet things, a.k.a. work the middle of the field and be Justin Fields' safety blanket, similar to how we talked about Hayden Hurst being the safety blanket for Bryce Young yesterday. Cole Kmet has already proven he can do that job. He's proven that he can be of value at tight end, and he is very adept at getting open and working the middle of the field. As such, tight end 15, 124 overall, ADP 128. I roster a lot of Cole Kmet because he is in that tight end double tap that I like, because I'm convinced tight end doesn't matter unless you get Kelsey. I've got a lot of math that bears that out in the background. What you would say, where I come in is this. Fine, give me Cole Kmet in the 12th round, effectively. And I'll go back to back in like 12 and 13. I'll get Cole Kmet and like Greg Dulcich. And that'll be my tight end room. Because none of them matter at that point. So I'll just get them off the bargain pile. If you're going to go bargain hunting, Cole Kmet's one of my guys. So Jason, I see you've been doing a lot of nodding here. So it seems like you agree with my general philosophy here. What do you think? Where are you at with Cole Kmet?
I mean, it's definitely right there. I have him in that same area for tight end. The fact that he is going to be probably the second target on the team, I mean, that makes it huge for him. It's just all the opportunities there. And like you said, if there is another injury on the Bears, that offers a lot of opportunity for him to have even more targets, which, I mean, could easily catapult him into high tight end. I mean, he would be a must start at that point. It's just crazy how effective he could be at that position, especially if it's Darnell Mooney or Claypool or whoever going out. Like, that would be having just those little extra targets would be very useful for him. And
historically, that would be Claypool. That's what we've seen.
That's part of the reason I threw his name in there, is because I was like, those are the two that I am more likely believe would have the injury, and so that it definitely pushes him to that kind of point. I mean, the fact that I still think he has a chance if either one of them go down to see over 100 targets this year. I mean, and that's
odd. Okay, even I'm not that bullish.
Well, Mike, I mean, because of the injury, that if there is an injury,
I see what you're doing there. Okay, that's a good clarification point. Mike, what do you think about Cole Kmet?
Yep, I'm in agreement with you guys. Like to wait on the tight ends, and he's in that range. He was tight end 8 last year, and he had 2 goose eggs to start the year. I think he had like 2 targets the first 2 weeks. So, he's shown that he's a solid player. And even in 2021, he basically had the same season as he had in 2022, except the touchdowns went up from 0, which is really hard to do when you're playing 17 games, and went up to 7. So it's not like he had this huge, abnormal year where he put up 900 yards or something. He's probably going to give you, 60, 70 catches, hopefully, and 600, 700 yards. We hope he catches, those 6, 7 touchdowns, and that's going to translate to a viable tight end.
Exactly. So with that, let's wrap the Bears here because we've spent more than enough time belaboring of what is going to be a really bad real football team. I think my final takeaways would be just to summarize it, I'm going to pass on Fields at that ADP. If you want to ferret around in the bargain bin at running back, I'd prefer either Rashawn Johnson or Donta Foreman just so I don't have to pay sticker price, and I think you'll get a fair amount of upside. Be aware that could devolve into a 3-headed monster where nobody matters, and that's the risk you run. Of the wide receivers, I tend to find myself more with more Darnell Mooney than anyone else just because it's value based. And if I've got to spend a 5th round pick, I'd rather not have to spend it on DJ Moore. I think there are other 5th round wide receiver type of options, or even go wide receiver earlier. And then by then I'm looking at running backs in the 5th round, at least more slanted to that type of thing. The real winner here is Cole Kmet. That's the one that I find myself with the most shares of for good reason. I think he's in for a very productive season in the background. So Jason, final thoughts on the Bears. Take us home.
I'm just more surprised that they have on the year over 7.5 as their line right now.
I can't. Yeah, don't slam that under. You got to slam that under if you're doing. Where's Mason when I need him? You got to slam that under on that. There's no way no. That's insane. We run a website called Important Nonsense, and that's the most nonsensical thing I've ever heard. Mike, what do you think on the way out here? Final thoughts.
Intrigued by the running backs because I think there's a lot of value potentially there if it's not a 3-headed monster. And I like what the Bears have done in terms of they've at least given Fields some weapons so that they can see what he really is as a passer, and he's not throwing to Byron Pringle and DeMarcus Robinson.
Such an incredibly low bar from what they subjected him to last year. That bar is so low that it's a tripping hazard in hell.
Yeah, they brought an option, singular, and option to pass to.
Well, I mean, Moore and now Mooney bumps to your 2, and Claypool is like your 3, and Tyler Scott is a DFS deep threat guy. But anyways, it's much improved from last year. So we'll see.
Didn't bring up Tyler Scott for a reason. Only in the deepest in a 16-team, 32 bench roster. That's when he would matter. That's when I would talk about him. All right, ladies and gentlemen, this concludes this year's annual Bitter Bears show. It's not as bitter as normal, but I will say just to get one last, there's no chance. If you can get anybody taking that 7.5, go under on that. They never win in 7.5 games. That's never going to happen with this team. That defense is still going to be really, really, really bad. But with that, because the defense is bad, they will have to huck it around and do some crazy stuff. So they will have to do something. But with that, tomorrow, we're not going to talk about a bad team for again. We've done 2 bad teams back to back, more than likely. Next week or tomorrow in the listening world, we're going to do a very much not a bad team. We're going to break down the Cincinnati Bengals. So we will catch you tomorrow. And until then, keep up the nonsense.
I'm Tim Kitzer from NBA Jam and NFL Blitz, and you can find all the guys at ImportantNonsense.com. Kaboom!